In the course of my almost 40 years in priestly ministry, the most challenging, the most difficult, the saddest of experiences has been dealing with family members, friends, survivors of suicide. And sometimes in the midst of the talk and conversation of the survivors, you might hear it said by someone who's just trying to find something to say in a horrible situation. You might find someone saying, "It must have taken great courage." Well, in fact, it's not so much courage as we know. But usually when suicide happens, it's due to some terrible desperation or a disordered perception of life and one's own life. It's more of an escape from that distorted perspective. So it's not really courage. Sometimes when we see daredevils, or we see people involved in what's today known as extreme sports, we see acrobats, trapeze artists, tightrope walkers, and we might look at them and say, "Wow, it takes great courage." Is that really courage? Certainly it's bold, certainly it's daring, but maybe it's just sort of feeding almost something like an addiction to thrills and spills. So it might not be courage. So what is courage? Especially that virtue of courage or fortitude that the church has always said is a gift of the Holy Spirit. Some of you may recall me telling the story, true story, of a young girl, I think she was 7 or 8 years old, who was afflicted with this rare childhood disease that was probably going to take her life. And the doctors discovered that, in fact, her younger 5-year-old brother had miraculously survived the same illness, and his blood built up antibodies to combat that illness. And so they thought that if they could get a blood transfusion from this little 5-year-old for his older sister, that could save her. And so, of course, this little kid is 5 years old. What does he know about doctors and medicine and so on? So they tried to explain to him what was involved, the doctors, his parents. And so basically they came down to, just asking this little boy, your sister is so sick, will you give your blood so she can live? Well, there was a pause, and then the little boy kind of took a real deep breath, and then he said to the doctor, "If it'll save Lisa, I'll do it." A little 5-year-old saying that. And so it happened, they got ready for the procedures and so on, and the two kids were laying there, I guess, on beds, pretty much parallel to each other for the procedure. And as the process of blood transfusion began, they looked at Lisa, who was laying there getting the transfusion, and actually they noticed color was kind of coming back into her face, and they started to smile. The doctor was there, the parents were there, even the little 5-year-old, as he noticed, he started to smile too. But then all of a sudden, the little boy's expression changed drastically. He stopped smiling, and he got kind of distressed looking, pale. And, the doctor noticed, and, what's wrong? And the little boy said to the doctor, "Am I going to start to die right away?" the little boy, in his little 5-year-old way, misunderstood and thought that he was going to have to give all his blood to his sister, which is sweet. But when you think about it, with that misunderstanding, he said, yes, I'll do it. Now that's courage, even for a little boy. Because the spirit of courage, or fortitude, as we call it sometimes, is a daring boldness in service of God or other people. That's courage. When I do something just for the thrill of it, for me, Joe McCormick, it might be daring, might be bold, but it's not the gift of fortitude that comes from the Spirit. Today, on this fourth Sunday of Advent, this year, we hear in the Gospel the story of Joseph. It's really the Annunciation to Joseph. In Matthew's Gospel, he focuses more on Joseph rather than Mary, as Luke does. And so in Matthew's Gospel, we hear that it's an angel that comes to Joseph in a dream and says, don't worry about taking Mary, even though she's pregnant. Don't worry about taking her in marriage and taking her into your home, because she, in fact, is going to give birth to Jesus, Emmanuel. And Joseph had the courage, the fortitude to just forget about all of the talk about him, against him in the community, so that he could, in fact, love Mary and take her into his home. That's courage. Daring, boldness, in service of God or other people, or both. As we come to the end of our Advent journey this year and prepare for the great celebration of the Nativity of Christ, we ask God to open our hearts anew for that gift, what's really the true gift of courage, that we might become better people, better disciples of Christ, and that our world might become a better place to live.